Greetings, ladies and mental gents, and welcome to my channel, where I like to make audio narrations of various stories from the internet. In this video, we will be focusing on a story from the subreddit HFY, called Billy Bob Space Trucker, Chapter 3. The link for the original story will be down below. And, as always, I hope that you enjoy. Diplomat Emily, please respond. Still locked in the bathroom, the diplomat tapped on her belt, quickly sealing the room in a soundproof barrier. This is Diplomat Emily. What do you need, Overwatch? Have you escaped from the station? Affirmative. I have taken refuge with another Death Wielder. He hauls cargo and seems to have high endurance and low curiosity. He's perfect for the mission. Is there a chance that he's working for the galactic government? None. His species is strange, a brand new one. From what he has told me, I think they're on a watch list of potential military threats. They have some very interesting tactics. Excellent. We make diplomatic contact with them and see if we can exploit their status. What are they called? They refer to themselves as humans. If possible, seek out the American clan specifically. If he is any indication of their behavior, they're just what we need. Do you need us to replenish your accounts? No, I've offered him 10 billion credits upon arrival at the capital, and that is more than enough to buy his loyalty, it seems. They seem to find contracts as soul-binding. Very interesting. We'll look into this Death Wielder with more care while you travel. Who is he? The diplomat glanced towards where she knew Billy Bob was sitting in his cabin. Perhaps the savior or destroyer of the known galaxy, if everything went according to her plan. His name is Billy Bob Space Trucker. In the cabin, Billy Bob had his sound system turned up as he hummed and tapped at the controls with the song, "Give me a job, give me security." Of course, he was singing along, but couldn't hold the tune to save his life. Emily soon opened up the bathroom and returned to the main cabin. But what the music, as loud as it had been, had no idea what was behind him. "Gotta be a blue-collar man." He was shouting more than singing at the end while playing an invisible set of drums as hard as he possibly could. When he heard a cough right behind him, he nearly jumped out of his seat. Jesus, don't sneak up on a guy like that. He quickly turned the music off and Emily took a seat in the co-pilot chair once more. "Is that some sort of caste war song?" she asked, and she looked over at him. "What? No, sort of. Look, we don't have castes. We choose our own jobs, and people can move from one job sector to another. It's just an awesome song. And part of my, group industry. I don't know what the right term for it." "So, what is a blue collar?" "Means that you work a job with high physical demands, mostly. Long hours, shitty conditions, stuff like that. But don't let that fool you. Plenty of us are intelligent and cultured just fine. We just like having our life a bit simpler. I come from California, for example, which is mostly known for hippies and yuppies and artsy-fancy types. But most of the state is common folk like me. Work hard, drink beer, that sort of thing. I've never really bought into the other image of my home. Aside from becoming the captain of my dance team at school, I fronted all over the style of those guppy shits. Step on up and my turf and you better bring it, or else I'm going to serve you so hard that you might as well gotten an F in the A. Emily was quiet as she stared at him. You lost me completely halfway through. He waved a hand at that. Never mind, not important. So what's up with the Arseface guys? The who? Those space crabs who were trying to kill you when we met. He waved his hand, since he couldn't be bothered to check the translator for the actual name now that he had their custom input set. Oh, the Arsefaces. They are from my home system. They've evolved on a nearby planet. My people and theirs have been enemies ever since the early spacefaring age. But since we are both evolved from our own death worlds, our struggles have been in other systems, since our homes are useless to each other. Wait, you're Death Wielders? And they were too. They kinda died pretty easy for Death Wielders. You have to remember, Billy Bob, that we evolved on standard gravity worlds, not your high gravity one. They are perfectly adapted for their planet, I assure you, as if I am for mine. And with that she reached up, finally putting back the hood, revealing some kind of fabric that had covered her face, which Billy Bob had mistook for a shadow. He gasped as she revealed a sleek-looking head covered in a soft white down and a pointed muzzle that had a few sharp teeth exposed, and one eye on each side of her pointed face. She looked like a bald eagle, and he had seen her fly, a space eagle. That's awesome. He quickly got up from his chair, rushing back to the fridge in the cabin, and returning with a can of beer, and handed it to her, while she looked confused. Yeah. Just say, I am the embodiment of freedom, liberty, and I love America. Emily looked at the metal can being held out in one of her hands and back at Billy Bob. I am the embodiment of freedom, liberty, and I love America? Fuck yeah. He gave her 2 thumbs up while grinning like a maniac. What's in the can? Beer. You said that before, but it doesn't translate. It's a carbonated alcohol, He was about to go on when she popped the tab and then bit at the side of the can with the order to suck the beer out with a surprising speed. He stood there, wide-eyed and open-mouthed, before she finished the beer and slammed the empty can against her forehead to crush it. Fuck yeah! Mittens jumped behind him and a sudden yell, but Billy Bob wasn't paying attention to the cat at the moment. You are awesome, lady. You are the best fucking diplomat that I've ever met in my life. How did you know how to do that? My people consume alcohol like that in a ritualistic fashion. It is to show trust that you aren't giving us lethal doses of alcohol. And I like the carbonation, though. That's new. What's it for? Helps you get drunk faster. He smiled and lifted his hand, open palm to the front in front of him. Nothing happened, and then he pointed at his open palm. Hit my palm with your palm. There was a pause before Emily reached up with one of her hands and tapped it against his. Harder. She repeated the motion with more force this time. That's a high five. We do that to show excitement and joy. Interesting. Why? I don't know. He was too excited to be anything other than loud and enthusiastic at this point. When she pointed behind him at Mittens, he picked up his startled cat before she could say anything. This is Mittens, that's his name. He's a cat, specifically a Martian marauder. Cats are animals of varying sizes on my home planet. They're fuzzy, and if you pet them, they purr. They show affection by harming you just a little. They eat meat. He gave the creature a firm belly rub as it squirmed and it tossed it back onto his bed. The cat looked like it had been gravely disgraced and began to clean its fur. Why are you so excited? Because you're awesome. All those damn Xenos that I've met with shitty names, shitty customs, and shitty attitudes about shit. But you look like a bald eagle, you shotgun like a pro, and you have a good goddamn name. Emily looked slightly to moderately confused, but nodded slowly, as she seemed far too excited over this. Well, I'm sorry if I'm too eager and loud, lady. I've just never met such an awesome Xeno before. Still grinning like an idiot, he got back into his seat to check that they hadn't drifted off course or anything life-threatening. Well, then I guess we're off to a start for a good friendship, Billy Bob. Fuck yeah, we are. So, how long do you drive between breaks? We've been moving for about 3 hours. Do you require time to rest or sleep? Not just yet. After eating, I go about 6 hours before eating again, roughly. Then I'll sleep for about 3 hours after that, roughly. How about your species? I should take a nap soon, and wake up when you're ready to eat. Do you have any other bedding? She looked back at the single bunk further back in the cabin, where Mittens was performing yoga as he licked himself. Can I move him? Yeah, just boot the fuzzball to the ground. Emily moved back towards the bunk, and Mittens looked up at her. She looked back, and then engaged in a staring contest. Unblinking space eagle versus unblinking cat. The tense confrontation behind him was lost on Billy Bob as he brought out some of his headphones so that he could listen to music while she took a nap. Working man time. The staring contest behind him had finally ended as Mittens broke first and Emily tossed him off the bed in victory. The cat huffed and quickly climbed up onto Billy Bob's lap for consolation petting, while the trucker bobbed his head to the tune and kept the ship from drifting off into another ships traveling through the FTL lane. It had hardly seemed like 3 hours when Billy Bob felt something tap on his shoulder, and he jumped up, sending Mittens flying through the lower gravity cabin onto the dash. Oh, right. He pulled his headphones off as Emily stared at him. Sleep well? I'm a little surprised. You drove for 3 hours more without any real company. Yeah, sure, no problem at all. I once had to drive a double about 30 asses out of my way to avoid some local smokies and make it with my 99 on time. No sweat. He paused and saw Emily's blank stare. I drove all day to make it do a tour around the Space Cops. See, how is that easier to say than what you said before? It's a space trucker thing. Wanna get something to eat? The Space Eagle shrugged, and he turned back to the controls, picking the annoyed Mittens up and setting him down on his lap so that he could start spinning down the engines and pull out the space lane to get some refueling station. Hey, how common are spacefaring deathwarders anyway? I was thinking about it while you were sleeping. We are fairly uncommon, but not unique and most highly adapted to one specific climate. Your species seems to be fairly resilient and adaptable, however. Yeah, that's humans for you. He pulled the Longhorn out of MFTL and brought it to the dock amongst the multitude of larger Xeno ships. His looked lost amongst the Atlas-class cargo trawlers and more specific local variants, but he really didn't care. Emily pulled her hood back up and followed him out into the station. Just like the others, he followed the flow of the crew to the center, towards the restaurants and entertainment venues. Unlike last time, it seemed like far more crews were eating whatever meal their internal clocks told them it was time to eat, and he had no problem shouldering crowds aside to find some place that looked like it would have food that he could eat. The issue came when he pushed past a group of green space geckos with bug eyes. Space gecko flies. Space fleckos? Hey, you ugly, native creatures, illegitimate son, watch where you're going. You're dealing with a squad of space flecko rangers, you know. He was glad that he was so quick with his translative functions to his implant. Otherwise he might have to learn some of the Xenos' names. Listen, Sparky, I was walking through and find a place to eat. He turned to walk away, but the creature snapped his fingers, and 10 fleckos spread out. Then some sort of awful synth Xeno music began to play as Billy Bob groaned. A floating orb began to change colors above them as they started to perform what he supposed was a dance. It was one of those races, apparently. They performed their dance as the Xenos around them spread out to give them space. He could hear the oohs and the ahs as they showed off their physical prowess. But he was tired of it. He grabbed the floating orb that looked confused, and then he turned it over to find the input port. Pulling out the galactic standard USB, he plugged into the selected song and his implant. Blame it on my roots, I showed up in my boots. He began a line dance that he got his friends in low places as the Xenos around him were shocked. A single creature danced back to the squad of Flecko Rangers. He had no idea what Fleckos were, but everyone was shocked. His poise, his grace, his hands tucked into his belt. It was like he didn't even need them to be balanced. Sheer madness. By the end of the song, the crowd was silent. He pulled his USB out of the floating orb and hurled it into the ground, smashing it before very firmly holding his raised middle finger in front of the Flecko leader. In case your translator is having trouble with my body language, that's how my species says, don't fuck with me. Turning, he began to walk away as the crowd parted before him. Come on, Emily, let's eat. He found a decently busy but still open restaurant and picked one of those Xeno chairs that wasn't too off before snapping it in half and stacking it halves so that he could sit like a regular chair. The staff looked over at him, but none said anything. Once the server came over, he had already thought over what he wanted. I want a hamburger and I want fries. The server today looked like it was the same sort of 6-armed space frog that he had dealt with last time. Maybe they were the Mexicans of the sector. Or something like that. A what with what? I want meat grilled on top of some bread, with potatoes that have been fried in oil. On the side, add in the space pickles and space onions and we're set. Oh right, space meat and space bread. And fried space potatoes. Make that up for me. The creature looked hesitant, but Emily seemed amused. I'll have some too. She slid a small black box across the table, and the creature quickly retreated to the kitchen. You don't mind eating meat in front of herbivores? Fuck no, not my fault that I need some damn protein. She made a shattering noise and sounded something like a bird call, which his translator informed him was laughter. He smiled back at his new friend. It took about 15 minutes before the space frog returned with 2 plates. What he brought out was a mess, and it looked like they'd combined 2 different meats, one burnt to the other bloody, and slapped it on the purple and green-looking space rye bread. They were sliced orange something. Space carrots? Well, they were orange, but looked more like orange space onions. The fried lumps looked like blue space potatoes, and white strips, which were fine. No sign of pickles. Good enough. He grunted, and the server quickly retreated once more. The other customers began to move away from them, obviously sickened by the sight and smell of meat. But they didn't mind. He was about to try his food when he saw the space fleckos walking in. Another floating ball above their heads. "Oh, fuck, guys, I'm trying to eat ya. I'll serve you again once I'm done." Then he brandished knives and bats. "Ah, shit. Got angry. I fronted all over your style, huh? You have insulted some dumb flecko in the ancient art of dance-off, and I will not tolerate your barbaric dance. You will pay." They advanced as they looked at Emily. "Is self-defense allowed here?" Of course. He nodded, and that stood up, walking towards the advancing fleckos. The patrons were fleeing at this point, while he stood and punted them. Not a fan of Garth Brooks. The leader screamed and charged, slammed the bat into his stomach. Billy Bob grunted softly, and then ripped the bat from the creature's hands. It was about the size of a little league bat. He turned it over in his hands, testing its weight as the flecko suddenly looked nervous. Then he grabbed the floating ball, plugged in his USB, and chose another song. "Everywhere I hear the sound of marching, charging feet, boy." They swung the bat into the flecko's head as teeth and xenoblood came flying out as the creature went flying. Well, the Rolling Stones played, and he kicked another flecko in the chest and waded into the group of them. They were no match for a high-gravity death welder. They were nimble and spry, but that didn't do any good against an angry space trucker with a bat. Even if it was Little League size, he could twist away from their knives and clock them with a fist, or the bat if he felt like it, on his way by. They tried, then stumbled past and regrouped to attack him all at once, but that just meant that it was easier for him to catch 2 or 3 of them with a single swing of the bat. Billy Bob had done plenty of fights growing up, and even more since he became a space trucker. He had no problems using his mass to his advantage at times that he simply shoved the flecko to the ground before jabbing his face in with the end of the bat, or even picking one up and slamming his face into the fleckos. It was a tactic that worked very well for him. Finally, the song was ending and he mopped up. Just one flecko still conscious as it picked it up and threw it out the front window. Or so he thought. Instead, what he thought was a window shimmered and it flew straight through. What the fuck? There isn't glass in that window. Nope, just a holographic display, Emily told him. So he cursed and picked up the bottle from the table that he hadn't been destroyed. And the flecko was surprised, but started to get up until he threw the bottle out the same window and it hit the thing's head. The glass shattered and he grinned before sitting down as sirens sounded throughout the station. He sat down with his food and a smile. Nice way to work up an appetite. Just explained to the cops that I was defending myself. Simple little brawl, nothing big. Emily stared at him with a shadowed hood and said, "Those were local soldiers. The cops are probably bringing reinforcements. When I said self-defense was allowed, I didn't mean it in the sense that they'll let you almost kill a squad of special forces." Billy Bob quickly grabbed the food and began to run out the door. "Get your meal. We're having takeout tonight." The diplomat sighed and grabbed her food as well, rushing to catch up with the fleeing space trucker as they escaped yet another refueling station. So ends another chapter in the life of Billy Bob, Space Trucker. If you enjoyed this story and wish to support the author, the link is down below. If you would like to support this channel, there are numerous ways to do so. They will also be listed in the description down below. But the easiest way to help this channel is to share it, subscribe, and like. And, as always, I will see you all in the next video, and I hope that you have a good one. Cheers!